Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Imani Cheers, and I am an associate professor of digital storytelling in the School of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University. I'm also the associate director in the School of Media and Public Affairs, and I am so excited to be here. This is my second year working with the festival and helping to lead and arrange our educational content. So I have planned a amazing day workshop for you. We are going to do a combination of things today. And I love to just start with some best practices and some tips. I am currently in my office here in Washington, D.C. You might see I get books and I got technical equipment and everything behind me. But today we're going to do a number of things. And first and foremost, with this evening's events. So I would love for you to utilize this chat box to engage. Do us a favor, tell us where you're from, what schools you represent. We want to make sure to give you all a shout out and engage. So thank you again so much for being here. This afternoon and this evening, we have two workshops ahead of us. The first one is going to be what I like to call structuring storytelling. And we have an amazing, amazing friend and colleague of mine. Her name is Grace Lee. She is an award-winning director and producer. And she's going to come in and share a little bit about structuring storytelling, in particular with her most recent project. And she has many, but her most recent project, which is the two-part PBS series called And She Could Be Next. Many of you have seen the films. The two-part series. For those of you who have not, we're going to play the trailer. We're going to let Grace sort of walk us through how she puts together storytelling. And I'm going to ask her about some other projects that she's been working on and finished up a little bit earlier this year. And hopefully you've had a chance to see some of those. So without further ado, as I said before, please share, chime in. I have some of my colleagues here who are going to also be monitoring our chat so we can make sure to remain engaged. So again, thank you all so much. Thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and get our presentation up so my colleagues who can help structuring storytelling, as I said. So I'm very, very, very excited to be here. I'd like to point out a couple of things, right? And it's really important when you think about how do you structure a story? How do you do it? How do you do it? What's going on? Most of you, if you're here and you're not a part of my class, which means I required it for our course curriculum, thank you, by the way. But for those who are not my students who are here, I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm going to engage. And as I said, I would really appreciate if you didn't make me feel like I was just talking to an empty screen, the way my students do sometime on our class Zoom meetings these days. But there are 5 essential elements of a story. And those are, in particular, characters, obviously, right? We know that we're going to have to utilize characters. We know most stories, and I always love to ask, and please throw this in the chat as well. But I even start with, like, what is your favorite story? If we think about our favorite stories, I'm the mom of a 6-year-old. I read a lot of bedtime stories and books, and we're currently reading the first book in the Harry Potter series. And one of the things is, for myself, who it's been years before I, since I've read the books, I mean, we're talking at least 10, 15 years ago. But rereading the books, I'm constantly reminded of who are the main characters, getting reintroduced to Harry and Ron and Hermione from the very beginning, and remembering how they even connected and became friends. Where is the setting of this story? What's the main plot? Where's the conflict? And ideally, what is the resolution? And in all stories that we have, whether it be we're reading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone or watching the film, we have to read the book first. That's the deal with my son. We finish the book and then we watch a film. But how does this all play out? In particular, in documentary filmmaking, I hope many of you all have already had an opportunity this week to engage in all of the amazing content that the March on Washington Film Festival has to offer. And whether you were watching films, or engaging in panel discussions and participating, which I hope you've been doing all, that I hope you have some feedback as there as well. I am going to jump in and share this quick video because I do love multimedia about from Pixar. From Pixar, and they have an amazing series called Pixar in a Box and structuring storytelling. So I'm going to play this clip a little bit to give us a little behind the scenes. And for most of us who are very, very familiar with Pixar, we can talk about, and I'd love to hear some of your favorite Pixar films. I'm a little old school here, so I'm going to go with the original Toy Story. It is absolutely one of my favorites. But even when I think about something more recent that my son has been engaged in and all of the amazing Pixar films that he loves, we saw Toy Story 4, which definitely dates myself a little bit. But we saw Toy Story 4, and I loved it just as much as I loved the original one. And I can't believe there were already 4 elements and 4 additions to this amazing story. So let's take a listen to see what the folks over at Pixar, how they structure a story. And then when we come back, I'm going to go ahead and introduce my friend and colleague, Grace Lee. So just hang on for a second.
Hi, I'm Kristen Lester, a story artist here at Pixar. Today we're going to talk about story structure, the way we organize and tell our stories. But before we begin, have you guys heard the joke about the mushroom that goes to the discotheque? A mushroom walks into a discotheque, and he walks up to a lady and he asks her to dance. She says, "Ah, gross, no, you're a mushroom." So he walks up to another lady and asks her to dance. "Ma'am, not interested." Lady after lady after lady. Rejected, rejected, rejected. Nobody wants to dance with him. Finally, the mushroom walks over to the bartender and he's so confused. He says, "I don't get it. Why does nobody want to dance with me? I mean, I'm a fun guy."
See, this joke has a structure. It's got an opening, a buildup in the middle, and an ending, which is, the punchline. That structure is a big part of what makes it funny. Structure is the answer to the question, what do you want the audience to know and when?
If you get the order wrong, it can be a real problem. Check it out. Hey, can I tell you a joke? All right, so there's this fun guy and...
Shoot! I messed up the opening.
Okay. Hey, can I tell you a joke? All right, so there's a mushroom who walks into a discotheque, and then there's a bartender there. Ah, darn it. I messed up the middle. Hey, can I tell you a joke? All right, so there's a mushroom who walks into a discotheque, and there's a bunch of ladies on the dance floor. He asks them to dance, and they say yes.
Dang, without conflict, joke over.
See, structure is important.
Just as structure is a big part of telling a funny joke, it's also essential to making a movie that has the emotional impact you want on your audience.
Shh, this is a great example.
Nemo! In earlier versions of Finding Nemo, the structure of the story was very different than the final film. The director wanted to interweave scenes of Nemo's parents' lives before they had kids as flashbacks throughout the whole movie.
Mm-hmm.
So you would see them meet,
hello,
fall in love, and eventually move into their house at the drop-off in little scenes throughout the film.
Oh, honey, it's beautiful.
The main story of Marlin and Nemo and their journey was pretty much exactly the way it is now. But with the flashback structure, it wasn't until the end of the film that you would find out that Marlin's wife Coral
look out!
and all of her eggs were killed by a barracuda.
When they showed the movie with this structure, they had one big problem. The audiences, well, they didn't like Marlin.
Looking at their story structure, the team realized that in this version of the film, the audience didn't find out why Marlin was acting this way towards his son until the movie was almost over. So they decided to re-edit the movie and remove almost all of the flashbacks, leaving only the scenes where Coral and Marlin's home is attacked by the barracuda, killing Coral and all of her eggs, except for Nemo. They moved these scenes to the beginning of the movie.
I promise I will never let anything happen to you.
This change in the story structure changed the audience feelings about Marlin a lot. They knew right from the beginning how much Marlin had lost and how brave it was for him to go after Nemo, and they loved him for it. In the case of Finding Nemo, finding the problem was a matter of rearranging the story structure. Of course, all our movies are different, and their story structure challenges are too. In this lesson, we'll look at the many different ways we think about story structure here at Pixar, and you'll get to try out for yourself different approaches to structuring your story. I wonder if I told the mushroom jokes in flashbacks. Could it be funnier? Probably not.
Oh, that was great. Got to love it. I'd love to know, in terms of feedback in particular, if you would have thought in particular with Finding Nemo, if the story structure, would you have connected with the characters better or worse as things get moved around? I want to introduce now, and we're looking at a little case study around storytelling and around structuring story. My dear friend, Grace Lee, who, again, I'm going to try not to, but I think it's important to read her bio and share with you all a little bit more. We put some of these things in the some links in the chat, so please take a moment and look at those. But Grace Lee is an independent producer and director. She's a writer working in both narrative and non-fiction film. She directed the Peabody Award-winning documentary American Revolutionary: The Evolution of Grace Lee Boggs. Phenomenal film. If you haven't seen it, you must absolutely. The Hollywood Reporter called that film an entertainingly revealing portrait of the power of a single individual to affect change. I'll read that again. An entertainingly revealing portrait of the power of a single individual to affect change. The film premiered at the Los Angeles Film Festival. It won its first of 6 audience awards before being broadcast on PBS documentary series POV. Previous work, The Grace Lee Project, won multiple awards, broadcast on the Sundance Channel, and was called ridiculously entertaining by New York Magazine, and a funny but complex meditation on identity and cultural expectation, which was a quote that Variety gave it. Her credits are lengthy. As I said, I'm just going to go ahead and let you jump in and look at her information, but I'm going to go ahead and bring Grace up and share a little bit. Hello, how are you?
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much. How are you doing?
How am I doing? Good question.
Yeah, I think an important pause, right?
Yeah, no, it is. It's a lot is going on these days, as if we look at the headlines, we see. But my standard answer during the pandemic is I'm okay. I'm healthy. My family is doing okay so far. And yeah, I'm okay.
Okay.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. And you know what? Okay, at this point, I think is just good enough.
That's right.
We are all just okay. It's heavy. We'll talk about it a little later, but I would be remiss if we didn't mention the fact that, like, I know you are, because I am, and we're friends on Facebook, so we see what each other share. But it's just a heavy day today. Yes. Today is a heavy day. When I was picked this day for the to share this empowerment lab 4 months ago, who would have known where we'd be September 24th, 2020. But I want to honor Breonna Taylor, her family, and just take a moment and just take a beat, right? Because it's a lot. Grace, your current project that you just wrapped up, and She Could Be Next. I'm going to go ahead and play the trailer. As I mentioned, a number of people have already who are participating have seen the series, but for those who are joining who might not have, I thought it'd be important. We'll play the official trailer, and then we'll come back in and we'll sort of break it down a little bit, looking at characters, plot, etc. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll get this played. So very excited.
In the history of this country, any guesses out of 11,000 people that have served in the United States Congress, how many women of color have served?
There is this assumption that Black people don't vote, that Latinos are not American citizens, that Asian Americans are Republicans, and that young people are wholly unreliable.
I want you to understand that who I am is a product of a movement.
There are not enough people on the inside that look like me. People aspiring to be leaders in this country, they need to go through women of color because we're making our voices known.
Es un honor estar aquí con ustedes ahora para celebrar el amor que tienen ustedes como familias que están separadas por este muro.
When I say I'm a social justice seeker, I'm a mama for justice, or all these things, that's where I'm saying I'm American. I don't need to say it. I act like an American.
Candidates do not normally talk to people in the Asian American community because historically speaking, we are the community that turns out to vote at the lowest rate. So we want to change that here today.
Cái cô kia cô không có ở nhà, bác gái có muốn đi bầu hôn với con dẫn đi bây giờ luôn.
We're no longer asking for permission to do what we need to do. We're going to do it, and we're going to lead from the top, and people need to see it.
The sort of traditional notions of what's possible in American politics are being challenged every day.
Elections are important, but our lives are on the line. Elections
Sisters and brothers, it's about building power in our community to win what is right.
Except the communities that need to be brought in reflect the new American majority. They're young, they're brown, they might speak another language.
And there's a lot of us. I'm excited about the fact that women of color are now coming into our own, that we're standing up and taking our rightful place in the pantheon of leadership, that we're changing what the face of leadership looks like.
It is a new day, there's a new coalition, and ultimately we're going to push this country forward because there's more of us than those that seek to do us harm.
Woo! I love it. Oh my gosh, so good. So Grace, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I would love to hear, let's just kind of go back, right? This is just sort of your bio, this is the, a little bit of the breakdown of the film. But can you tell me, where did this idea come from?
Sure. So, like a lot of, well, I don't know if like a lot of people, but I've always been interested in politics, but not so much politicians. Been kind of skeptical of them. But back in 2013, I actually was working on another documentary series about women in politics. I was a work for hire. It was sort of a more historical film. And that's when I met Rashida Tlaib for the first time. She was then a state representative from Michigan, from Detroit. And I was it was sort of like my eyes like lit up because it was the first time I actually met someone in politics who I thought, oh, who is she? Like she's someone who felt very accessible to me. She reminded me of people I knew. She was a daughter of immigrants like me. She's from the Midwest like me. She's a mother of young children, and she was really rooted in her community. And I remember thinking like, wow, she's interesting, right? And there's got to be more people like her. Fast forward to 2016, one of our producers on the series, Jyoti Sarda, she actually approached me about possibly doing another project about women in politics. And this is the year we thought we might have our first woman president. But we didn't. And, all of the work that I've done in documentary tends to be about communities, women, immigrants, communities of color, the sort of people that I see in my own life, right? And it just felt like, it was time to tell a story about American politics where we centered both race and gender, because as we see today, you really can't tell a story about politics in the United States without doing both of those things. And it felt like, here's a moment. This was, 2016. We hadn't seen the wave of women that happened in 2018, but we felt like, oh, here's an opportunity to really explore this phenomenon when we film in 2018. So that's how it came about.
Wow. And with meeting all of these individuals, how did you even, because as we start talking about characters, right, and the individuals. So you mentioned that you had met Rashida Tlaib and all these. So like, where did Stacey Abrams come from? I'd love for you to share a little bit more about how you went to expanding and realizing that it wasn't just these 1, 2, maybe even 3, but we were really at the beginning of a major movement in American politics.
Right. I mean, I think, and so I should also say, like, I did not do this alone. I have a co-director, co-producer, Marjan Savinia, another producer, Jyoti, and we knew that this would be an ambitious project because not only did we want to, you know, provide an array of different candidates from all different sectors of society, but we also wanted to be geographically diverse, ethnically diverse, age diverse, and also diversity in what level of government we were talking about. You know, you have someone like Bushra Amiwala, you see on this screen right now, who was only a college student when she ran for a very local office, up to someone like Stacey Abrams, who was running this historic campaign to be the first Black woman governor, right? Sorry, what was I saying?
Yeah, what we were mentioning just how this is, of course, it's a collaborative effort.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's always important. And for filmmaking in general, especially for all the students who are engaged, I know in particular my students where I require you to work individually now as you're learning. But Grace, you can attest that filmmaking is not an individual effort.
Oh, no way. I mean, it's totally collaborative. The other thing we did wanted to do, it's sort of, because it was such an ambitious project and it was sort of conceived as a bigger series from the beginning, I knew I wanted to engage other documentary filmmakers, other women of color, accomplished directors who could help tell the story. So for example, Yoruba Richin, who is accomplished documentary filmmaker from New York, you know, I said, hey, Yoruba, I'm doing this. Would you be interested? She's like, yeah, I want to do Stacey Abrams. Because she knew who Stacey Abrams was. You know, like those of us who are interested in politics, we follow people. Like I've been following Rashida since 2013, you know, like I knew then this person is going to go somewhere, right? Someone like Maria Elena Durazo on the screen right there. I didn't know of her, even though she is in Los Angeles like me. And she was a longtime labor organizer, you know, someone who had, you know, grew up as a migrant farm worker with her family, became a labor organizer, you know, really representing low-wage immigrant workers, particularly women. And we learned that she was running for the first time ever at age 62 in 2018 for California State Senate. So it wasn't just like, let's just pick, there's no list of people where you can find and like this person's running for office and they'll let you film them. It was a whole process of doing research, you know, sort of making sure that we got the diversity that we wanted, also interviewing them and making sure that they were also okay with being on camera and being filmed. And also, did they sort of support the thesis that we were exploring in the film, that women of color are this transformative force, also that they come from community, they come from organizing, they come from, you know, places that we haven't seen in politics before.
Absolutely. And it's so, you know, I don't want to give away too much of the film, but I will say, so you started filming in 2016.
Yeah, no, we started filming in 2018.
2018, right? Started in 2018. And are you still filming? Is the series done? Are you looking to add additional episodes? It's a 2-part series, but could it potentially be longer? Oh, sorry, we had just a quick audio challenge. 1 second. And for the chat, please, I want to stress for the chat, please make sure that you are engaged. Ask some questions, ask your questions, throw those in the chat. We have some folks who will be able to make sure that we see that those commentary there. So we're still, I think, unfortunately, Grace, are we back? Are we better? Sorry, we had a bit of a little reverb.
Okay, I don't know if I took the headphones out because I wasn't sure.
Okay, I think we're all good. We got our production folks. They're like, it's fine, just keep going.
Okay. No, so you know, this was conceived to, you know, we shot it in 2018 and part of 2019, and then, you know, it was meant to be released in 2020, right?
Yeah.
Like, this could go on forever, you know.
Sure.
Movement.
Absolutely.
We're really telling, it really wasn't an election story, even though it took place over this time period of 2018. It was really more about the movement, because we were seeing like this evolution of women of color as candidates and organizers. And in this particular moment, as we're experiencing now, we see just how, you know, influential these folks can be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is so critical. And it's so important as we're talking now, as you said, like, how do you identify, how do you find, and then, you know, spoiler alert, but many of the people in the documentary were elected. have gone on to do absolutely groundbreaking and amazing things in their cases. We know that the setting, so we're looking at how do you tell this conversation? Let's shout out where exactly, how many different cities and states were you all filming in?
Right. So as I said, we wanted to have diversity to reflect, the diversity of this country. We filmed in Georgia, Michigan, California, Texas, and Illinois.
Well, okay. So intentionally, as you mentioned, that's fairly diverse. You got the Midwest, you got the South, you got the West.
We don't have the Northeast, but
not the Northeast.
They get a lot of attention.
They do. They do. Absolutely.
But I would say that even though we don't, I mean, part of it was this kind of juggling of characters as well as, what issues are they also kind of bringing to the table? Like, for example, in Texas, Veronica Escobar, based in El Paso, she's really involved in border rights, border issues. She lives on the border. In Georgia, Stacey Abrams. Also, we have Lucy McBath from Georgia, talking about gun violence. Her son Jordan was, murdered in a infamous case, which propelled her to become a gun violence activist, anti-gun violence activist. California, there's Maria Elena is in California. That one was more like, here's this person who, Latina, but also longtime labor rights organizer, and somebody who is really kind of her whole life has reflected, like, she's the oldest of all of them, but her life sort of embodies, sort of the themes of the film as well. And then Bushra in Illinois, youngest college student. It was really interesting to see her because, not only do we have Muslim American woman, also Pakistani, South Asian, but also she was really engaged in registering so many people to vote for the first time, young voters, immigrants who've lived generations in this country, but have never really felt like, it was important for them to vote because they didn't feel like it was for them. We wanted to get that story in there as well. So we had a lot of different things we were trying to cover in this series.
Awesome. It is, again, it's wonderful. And for those, the few people on who have not had a chance to watch it, I will save some of the amazing details for when you do get a chance to watch it. But you focus, so we all know also with structuring storytelling that setting is a place, but it's also time. So you were very clear, you started filming in 2018. It wasn't necessarily supposed to be an election story, but obviously it's about politics. Obviously a number of the characters were running for office, many of whom, I mean, this is no spoiler alert, of course, were elected. Which is, of course, super important to mention. But can you talk to us a little bit about how with a lot of your films and the work that you do, where you're really sort of you're telling these very personal and intimate stories. Tell us a little bit about how, like, as a documentary filmmaker and storyteller, how do you do that? Especially like when I think of Lucy McBath, I mean, my heart just goes out to her. The way she's been able to turn her pain into purpose is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that successful politicians or effective politicians have that filmmakers have is they know how to tell their story. They can authentically tell their story. And the folks who agreed to let us film with them, they're very comfortable with themselves, like I would never let a camera crew come and follow me, especially doing something so public, right? As running for office, with kids and whatever. But I think that these women understand that they're doing politics in a different way. And they also understand the power of being seen, right? So many times when we think about what a politician is, it's like a white guy in a suit, right? It's not, Palestinian American woman from Detroit with 2 kids, right? It's not, someone who was a flight attendant for Delta Airlines for 20 some years before she became a gun violence activist, right? So I think it's really important. And it was important for those of us making the film to actually lean into that, and see, provide opportunities to see people beyond just the podium, right? Mm-hmm. We all see those politicians on the news. It's kind of why I have this vision of politicians as being boring, right? Sure. Like you see them when they come to the podium, they have their talking points. And I've interviewed lots of politicians, and some people are like that all the time, right? But how are you doing politics in a different way to represent a new kind of, it's not even new. It's just something that hasn't been seen before. When we talk about this new American majority, I mean, that's the thing that has motivated me. I'm part of that new American majority. Like we don't see Asian Americans, you don't see children of immigrants, you don't see people telling our stories in that way.
Mm-hmm. So important, Grace, and that's really critical. We have a question actually from YouTube. So thank you so much. And the question is: are men of color also making progress in the political scene? For example, African American men and women recently who have been elected as mayors of cities. But I think in particular she means African American men who have been elected mayors of cities. So is this potentially, and Chile, this is maybe another film topic? Perhaps?
Well, maybe the person who posed the question should make that film. I can't do it all, right?
No, you can't.
There's plenty of room for everybody to make these stories. I mean, I got into filmmaking because I wasn't seeing stories that spoke to me, right, in media. So yeah, I definitely think Black men are making lots of progress in the political scene, but I think we need more on every level.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a great point that you mentioned. And we could even talk a little bit about some of your previous work. And I want to take a moment to thank, excuse me, everyone who is joining on Facebook Live as well as YouTube. Share this conversation out, engage, ask us questions. This is a really special opportunity to have some amazing people here for today and tomorrow. So ask us questions, engage. Thank you so much for being here. But Grace, I would love to, Ethan, when you talked about your first film, and I remember actually when we first met, you were in the early stages of your Grace Lee Boggs documentary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this was like 2011.
Yeah.
So what I think about, you completing that project, so phenomenal. Excuse me. I'm getting emotional. If you haven't seen American Revolutionary,
it's actually streaming free on PBS right now. They've brought back a bunch of older films, in this moment. It's a series called The Color of Justice. But yeah, if you don't know who Grace Lee Boggs is, I mean, she is an incredible organizer, philosopher, human being. I highly recommend people, especially young people, to watch the film.
Talk about wanting to be inspired. And Grace, I'm so grateful. Actually, I did recently see that it was being screened or streamed again. And I recently hosted a little movie night actually 2 weeks ago for GW students, a virtual movie night. And we played it. I have a series called Film Fridays. And that was our inaugural film because it's so good and so timely. Yeah. And the lessons of her life and her dedication to justice and equality are so important. So if you don't know who Grace Lee Boggs is, look her up and then go watch this Grace Lee's film. That's your homework assignment. It's your homework. So I love to also throw out the plot. We've already talked about it. We played the trailer, but I just wanted to throw the plot up there. This is really quickly from all the work. There's like a PR kit that goes with films for the filmmakers on the chat right now. You'll kind of know what that is, but this kind of looks at exactly what the story is. You kind of get your like 2 paragraphs there. But I think it's really important also, Grace, and I'd love to get your insight a little bit about, because we're looking at the structure of story, right? So we looked at our characters and we just focused on and just pulled out 4. There's many more characters in this film, right? So I just pulled out just 4 quick examples earlier in the presentation. We talked about setting, and setting, how it's important to not just be a physical place, but also time acts as an element of a setting, right? It's important to put the context that the 2018 midterm election and how that brought in the record number of women, people of color into political office. And then there's the conflict, right? There's the conflict. Can you talk a little bit about some of the conflicts that you developed, and maybe some that you might have known were already evident with the characters, and then some that kind of surprised you?
Sure. I mean, even though I keep saying it's not an election or a campaign film, I mean, there is built-in conflict. Is this person going to win? You know, they're putting all of their energy and money and life and all their resources into this, race, right? So that's one huge conflict. Are they going to win or not, right? Like, have they done everything that they can? Other conflicts exist for each of the characters in that, they are... so one of the things that was important for us when we were picking the characters, picking the folks to follow, was they also embody things that this country is grappling with, whether it's immigration, the border wall, right? Veronica Escobar talks about that, or we see her actually there. There's this poignant scene where families from both sides, Mexico and the United States, meet, through the wall for 3 minutes or 3 minutes, they get to hug, and then they're separated again. So sort of hinting at like this immigration policy that this country has. Gun violence. Lucy McBath talks about this is the issue that motivates her and why she is running for office. She's doing it for her son, Jordan. She lost everything. She is not afraid of anybody, even, running against in like the most Republican district of suburban Atlanta, because she lost the most precious thing that she had already, right? She's not scared of anything. So individuals have conflict, right? Rashida Tlaib, right? She has been targeted by, President Trump, right? Like we see that even after being elected, the president of the United States has targeted her personally, right? And like, what does that mean when you're getting like hate tweets and, just because you're serving your constituents, right? So I think these women's lives embody so much conflict, and it's not so much like there's conflict in the story, but they are dealing with so much internal and external conflict. You can't help but sort of feel that as we're sort of moving through the story.
Wow. That is so important, as you mentioned. And I like to tell my students and young filmmakers, especially when you're doing documentary work, right? You don't want to, and there's a fine sort of ethical line with highlighting and mentioning conflict, and then of course not exploiting that, right? Do you have any best practices for, especially when you're talking to people and you're hearing someone talk about receiving death threats, or you're interviewing someone who her son was murdered in what was clearly a racial incident. Like how do you have those conversations? What for young filmmakers who are like, I want to go out and tell a story, I want to engage? Any tips?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest tip for any documentary filmmaker who is going to engage with someone on sensitive subjects is you have to gain their trust. And how do you do that? How do you show this person that their interests, you have their best interests, right? I mean, we had to do a lot of that to convince folks to be in the film, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are our motivations? What's motivating us? Like, what is the story that we want to tell? And for us, it's really hard for people in politics to see beyond like the next week because they're just trying to get elected, right? But, for us, we always said, like, we are documenting history. You are historical people, right? Like you're going to look back at 2018 and see, I was saying this, you're going to look back at 2018 and see that you were on the ground floor of this change that was happening in the United States, right? Like this movement. And it was true, right? Like, and, it's, I don't know. I mean, part of it is experience, and just, part of it is also your own, like, conviction and passion in why you're telling the story. Like, why do I want to tell this story? I want to tell this story because it affects me. It affects my country. It affects, like my government. It affects who's representing me, right? That is like, I think many times the stories I tell are very personal, but this one really combined like personal, political, what's happening in the world, history, all of the things that I care about. And I think that comes across. I think, also, I have a track record, right? Telling the Grace Lee Boggs story helped a lot because even working on that film, it definitely changed my life in terms of how I look at movements, how I look at how individuals, can work for change their entire life. It's not going to happen like in one election, definitely not. But it's like a long game, right? It's a marathon. The other conflict I forgot to mention, which is so apparent in this series, is voter suppression, right? It's something that, it's the whole part 2, especially in Georgia. We did not anticipate that. We knew voter suppression existed.
Yeah.
Did not see how nefarious it was going to be, and that we would be right in the thick of it, documenting it as it was happening. And that's the thing that, we were working on this film for so many months, and we thought like election day 2018 will be done. I'll be ready to go back home to LA from Georgia. And then of course it wasn't solved. I had to stay for 2 more weeks watching people chase provisional ballots, trying to figure out like, did somebody's vote actually count? Was their voice actually heard? Right. All of that stuff, and so that just kind of, even though we shot in 2018, we filmed in 2018, it became even more relevant in 2020,
Absolutely.
right? We saw what happened in Georgia. We see what's happening right now. So, yeah.
It's so critical. And a quick shout out to another film that's in the film festival, All In, which is going to be on Saturday. It also features Stacey Abrams. It talks a lot about voter suppression, and it really goes really deep into voter suppression. So please, for all those who are going to be joining us later on this weekend, a shout out to our Saturday programming, All In. It truly is a fight for our democracy. And you focus on it, Grace, as well, as you mentioned in part 2. And it's so critical. And we saw it in 2018 where, for those who are paying attention, we're like completely dumbfounded, and we're seeing it now. It is absolutely happening.
Yes.
As we speak. Every time the current occupant of the White House tries to instill irrational and false fear around mail-in ballots and says, as he did yesterday, not talking about a peaceful transfer of power, like we should all be terrified right now. I don't like to call it like fear, but we should pay attention. And if you're not paying attention, rights are just literally being snatched in front of our eyes.
Not only should you pay attention, you should act, right?
And you should act.
We should all stop this. It's not what this country was founded on. It is not what a democracy is about.
Not in the least bit. Grace, we want to shout out, thank you, Hannah, one of my students also, another question from YouTube. Were all of the women you featured receptive to being in the documentary from the beginning? Did you have to do a little coaxing?
A little bit. Some were just like, yeah. No, we had to talk to them, right? We had, as I said before, we had to sort of say who we were, what, where this would, what were our intentions? And also, some were, someone like Rashida Tlaib I had known before. I had actually been asking her since 2013, if you ever run again, I need to follow you, right? And she actually wasn't running until quite late in the game. She, I don't know if folks recall, but John Conyers, who held that seat for 53 years, it suddenly was vacant. And that's when she decided to run, right? Trying to think who else. Yeah, Bushra Amiwala, I think she was interested, but she had to convince her parents. And here's a
super important, yeah.
Yeah, why would somebody let their youngish college student daughter be, followed around by a camera? But here's where, why it matters who's telling the story comes into play. So Geeta Gandabir, who is one of our story directors, field directors, she's also South Asian, right? And she brought along Asad Faruqi, who also shot most of the series, who's also Pakistani. And as soon as they met, mom was like, oh, hi, they're having chai and she's cooking for them. And, we joked that Bushra's mom was trying to find Asad a wife, by the end. So anyway, it just sort of speaks to why kind of, people see you, right? When they see somebody, just like when you see someone come to your door who looks like you to ask you for, would you vote for this person? You might listen to them a little bit more, keenly.
Yeah. So important. I tell my students all the time because it's so critical. Representation matters. Representation matters. It's not the only thing. It's not necessarily it's not your only avenue. You of course have to have, as Grace mentioned, the ethics. You have to have the track record. You have to be genuine. There are all of these other elements, but representation definitely matters, which is super important to notice. We're not, as I said, for those who have seen the resolution in the film, I want you to watch it. I want you to watch the 2-part series. I want you to engage. I want you to share the series with other people. I am all right now about like virtual movie nights, like another way to engage. And I've been doing this with several of my friends. I know we're all like zoomed out, and I even want to thank everyone for taking the time to be on this evening, because I know it's hard to still engage. But it's super important that you are sharing and having conversations, right? And we're just engaging. So we have another question from Choosy on this. What's our process for going through your materials towards determining the best entry point for the story? Oh, interesting question.
That's a great question. I mean, first I should also shout out our editor, Julie Witze. I mean,
editors are
crucial to this process. Julie was from the beginning just looking at everything and just kind of taking notes and sort of cutting together smaller reels like of stuff that was interesting, and just really looking through things very carefully, because we had a lot of different sources coming through.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, we always had sort of big themes that we wanted to cover. You know, we knew that we didn't want a ton of like talking heads, you know, just kind of facts information. We wanted to like be with people, you know, sort of getting to know them as characters. And it's just kind of, you know, that sort of cutting it together and finding a rhythm. And all of that is an art of editing, which it just comes through the process. It's like writing. It's like constantly writing and rewriting all the time. I mean, the process is just looking at stuff over and over again, having lots of conversations, right? And yeah, I think, I don't know if that's not that specific, but that's my process.
Yeah, no, it's super important, that process also, and that element. Another question, again, shout out to my students. I see you. But Zakir asked, were there any points in the story where you had to adapt in how you told the story as a whole, as events were happening in real time? So in particular, of course, for documentary filmmaking, it's one thing when you know, you're doing a fictional script, you have a script, right? You have, I mean, there might be weather issues, or maybe an actor gets sick or something. But when you were filming in real time, Grace, did you have to adapt? Did things sort of pop off and move?
I feel like we're constantly adapting. You know, it's just like you show up at one thing and nothing happens, or right when you, I mean, this is kind of the mantra, like sort of, you know, documentary filmmaking is all about like, as soon as you turn your camera off, something happens, right? But two things. One is the election night. Rashida's election night, the primary night, it just went on forever. Like we started at 6 a.m. in the morning because we wanted to get the people like going to the polls and all of that stuff. And then it just wouldn't end. It just kept going till like 3 a.m. And there was like a party, the big party across the street. There's like the headquarters where it looks really serious. People look really stressed out, and sort of cutting in between those two was just like, when are we going to get the results? Right.
Wow.
The biggest point when we had to adapt was election day in Georgia in 2018, where it still wasn't, you know, we didn't have the results because it was too close to call. There were like all these ballot issues. And, you know, the Abrams campaign wanted to continue to chase and make sure that every vote was counted. And we tell the story of like our whole crew. We had like, you know, several of us in Georgia. We were sitting at this cafe, like I was going to go to the airport. You know, we were all getting ready to go fly to our respective places. And we just thought like, we should probably stay here, you know, because it's going to, we came this far. We have to follow this story through. So
you got to get it.
Yeah. So we just had to stay.
You had to stay, which is important. And it's so great that, when I think about how you adapt and you change, that you just like to do, you have to do it. I keep reminding my students where you know, documentary filmmaking period, I want to be here, or just content creation is a lot of work, and it's long hours. And like she said, you're right. I mean, you could be 12, 13, 14, 15 hours. I've been on set. I had 20 hours on set one day. You were seeing stars at like hour 18. You're like, I don't know where I am. Shout out to craft service for always coming through with at least the munchies. They will feed you well. But it's really, really important. So this is awesome. I think I have, yeah, okay, good. All right. So our next speaker, speaking of POV, is also here. But Grace, I want to, one last question that I see is coming in, which is so exciting. I was just wondering how you were able to fund your documentary. Ooh, funding, always crucial. And what routes do you generally seek out to fund your projects without compromising your vision?
Good question. That could go on forever. I mean,
I a hard question with like 3 minutes left.
Generally, I mean, I am an independent filmmaker. Most of the time, for my own personal projects, I've raised money through a combination of foundation, like philanthropy grants, as well as you know, sort of partnering with like public television. So that's what happened in this case. You know, they came in at one point, and there's various entities within public media, once we decided we were going to go with POV, that, you know, sort of helped. You know, the POV and public television didn't come in until, you know, much later in the process. We had to raise a lot of that money ourselves independently. But yeah, it was mostly a combination of investment, sort of foundation grants from nonprofits, as well as public media.
And do you also, I mean, I'm assuming you're also, you put money into your own projects, right?
I don't have money to put in my own project. It's more just like my own labor. I put my labor, you know, no one got paid. I mean,
yeah,
this is not a practice to follow, but we didn't get paid because this one was so dependent on time. And, you know, I think, we just had to sort of jump into it. Before I leave, can I just shout out one thing?
Please.
Yeah, we have actually at 7:30 Eastern time, we have And She Could Be Next event called All Eyes on Youth Voters, Young Voters. That's going to happen if you go to andshecouldbenext.com or our And She Could Be Next Facebook page or Twitter or whatever, you can find the link to it. We have Bushra Amiwala, as well as 3 other young people, activists, who are going to be talking about youth voting. So I hope people can join. I think it'll be a really great conversation.
Awesome. And Grace, thank you so much. Before I let you go, as you're wrapping this up, any final thoughts? We know that the upcoming event in a couple, about an hour, about 90 minutes from now, that's coming up. But any sort of final thoughts for our students and our young filmmakers?
I mean, honestly, like my real thing is, does everybody have a plan to vote? Are you registered to vote? It is the most important election of my lifetime and probably yours. Young people are the key to the future, right? I'm so excited about Gen Z. You know, Bushra is like, should be president someday, right? Like, I feel like, you know, the movements that we're talking about and She Could Be Next, it's what excites me. You know, the big theme for the series is there's an organizer in all of us, and we don't all have to run for office, but we can organize our friends, we can organize our families to make films, go to vote, you know, make change in the world that we live in. So I hope that people have a vote plan.
Awesome. I mean, there is no better way to end this conversation. It was always too short. But friend, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Such an honor to share with you and for our March on Washington Film Festival audience. I hope you enjoyed. Pay attention. Check out the film And She Could Be Next. American Revolutionary, The Life and Times of Grace Lee Boggs. It's streaming right now on PBS. So engage, watch it. And Grace, thank you. I know I have a plan to vote. I'm sure you do too.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Bye. Friend. Thank you so much. So yeah, I'm really excited. That was awesome. So thank you all for engaging and staying here with me. And do not go anywhere. Because I have another special guest to introduce you to. who's coming up. We are, I'm a stickler, my students, I'm a stickler on time. So we got someone else coming and joining us right now, and I'm so grateful for their time. So we're gonna bring Mr. Asad Mohammed up on the screen. Hello, sir.
Hello, how are you?
I'm so good.
Dr.
How are you?
Cheers. I am great.
Awesome.
I'm feeling good. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
So grateful for you. I know we're going to go ahead and take, and I know Grace as well, which I think is always kind of fun. It's such a small group of, the world is small in this circle. So I am, especially being that you are the head of, you do impact strategy, also some amazing thing with POV. I'm going to stop talking. I have been running my mouth. I've been running my mouth for the last hour, and I'm sure you all want to hear more things. So I'm going to ask my colleagues behind the scenes to go ahead. We're going to take off my presentation. I think I have to stop sharing my screen, or there it goes. It's gone. Oh, we lost Asad though. Bring him back. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And we're gonna move, and Asad has his own presentation. Asad, were there? Are you up and good to go?
No, I'm not.
You're sharing your screen. I can share it also if it's I have it.
Can you? Yes, that'd be fabulous. I forgot about that feature.
No problem whatsoever. I'm gonna go ahead and share this immediately. But Asad, while we're sharing, if you would like to just with our audience, if you just like to share a little bit about yourself. Of course, your bio and things are up on the website. But for those who are joining us, tell us what you do.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Asad Mohammed. I am videoing in from Detroit, Michigan, land of the Anishinaabe people. I'm happy to be here. I go by he, him. I work at POV as the Vice President for Impact and Engagement Strategy. That covers our community engagement arm of the organization as well as the education arm of the organization. So we work with filmmakers to bring their works to communities across the country. So beyond the broadcast, that's where our work really kicks off. Making sure that the film lives well beyond people seeing it in their homes, but also that we reach the people who are not tuning into PBS. Documentary film and PBS audiences PBS reaches 99% of homes across the country. And that's awesome, but we provide space for people to have the discussions following the film and make those connections with mission-aligned organizations that reflect the content of the different films that we curate. So every season we curate about 14 to 16 films. We are happy that And She Could Be Next is part of our season 33, this season that we're in right now. So you can catch POV every Monday night at the local PBS station near you. I can keep going. So there are, like I said, my department runs the education and community engagement portions of the organization. Thank you so much, Dr. So we have an image here from one of our season 33 films, In My Blood It Runs, which really brings up issues around how we maintain our indigenous cultures, our own family traditions, and also how young people are wrestling with education that doesn't speak to them many times, and what can we do about that? And it engages this young Aboriginal boy who's telling his story. So the film is beautifully narrated by him, and if you can, we hope that you can catch it. In My Blood It Runs. It premiered on Monday night and it's streaming now on POV. So definitely check it out. It also speaks about the school to prison pipeline, and they're going through some of the same things in Australia that we are facing in the United States. And over 90% of children who are incarcerated in juvenile facilities in Australia are indigenous to land, and like Dewan would say, are Black people, and they indeed identify as Black. So yeah, this is a feature on the film. We can go to the next slide. So POV, we're the longest running nonfiction series on PBS. Ask About Us. We've been around for a long time and proud to have be able to bring filmmakers like Grace Lee to homes across the country. These list some of the awards. These awards do mean something in terms of being recognized by your peers in the industry, but also supports filmmakers in getting additional funds for their next projects. Lots to be discussed around just the award process and the validation and who's sitting on these boards. But there have been initiatives to diversify many of the tables. Still a lot of work needed, but these are some of the awards that we've received.
Yeah. And you said this is, which season are we at? 33rd?
Yep, we're in season 33.
Awesome, amazing.
So,
I actually, and I love as an educator, and this is sort of a shout out to any educators who are also joining us. My colleagues, I personally feel, Assad, you all have the best resources for introducing, engaging through documentary filmmaking. I know a lot of my colleagues where we're always looking for ways to have just discuss, hard topics. And as much as, offering our students an article or a book is super important, but there's a power in filmmaking, and POV, you all you're literally the best to do it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we were the first the first series to start building educational resources, which I'll talk about a little later. And in this moment where educator is a broad term, right? So many parents and aunties and uncles and folks have stepped in to support the education of the children in their homes or in their neighborhoods. So yeah, I'm going to get into that a little bit later about how we can support you in this moment with documentary, with our resources. So this slide talks about our viewership. So we reach around 2 million viewers per program. Out of all the shows on PBS, we really speak to a more younger and diverse audience, which we're proud of. And this last piece is important because so many of us have been latchkey kids. I know I was one growing up in a single parent home, and one of the people that raised you or entities that raised you at times is technology, especially in this moment. So many people are learning and getting guidance from what they watch. So it's great that we are in households with incomes under 40,000. I'm not saying that only speaks to single family homes, single parent homes, but it does speak to an audience that is sometimes forgotten. So because we are public media, we get that reach, which is amazing. And that's what filmmakers are looking for, to get their stories out there. 2/3 of our programs are directed by filmmakers of color, and over 80% are women. These are numbers that we track every season, and it speaks to this season, right? So it's important that we're, in this moment where so many organizations are putting out solidarity statements and sometimes it's speaking the jargon and saying the words that we are actually putting our money where our mouth is. So our budget reflects who's getting the largest portion of the funds that come in the organization, and we are dispersing it to filmmakers. And it's important that they look like communities whose stories need to be told, especially by people of those communities. And we have this wonderful thing called the community network, where people can, for free, you can borrow our films to hold your own screenings. So in the moment of COVID, we had to pivot to virtual screenings pretty quickly, which really entailed getting permission from filmmakers to share their work via Dropbox and using timed windows where people can access their work. We always want to make sure that we're protecting the integrity of the art and these stories, right? These are real people. We don't call them characters, they're protagonists. There was a conversation that was recently had about even calling folks who share their stories and who are featured in documentaries as subjects, and what's the root of that word, and even that thinking sometimes is placing the person who's sharing their story to be subjected to the will of the filmmaker, right? So we want to see more participatory filmmaking. We want to see folks brought on as culture consultants, where you can give them a line in the budget to make sure that all the teachings that folks are giving and the contextualizing that people do about their communities for outside filmmakers. And even if you're of that community, sometimes you don't know all the ins and outs of how to best approach storytelling with this community. So there are creative ways to make sure that you are having impact even in making your film. And it really starts with empowering the vulnerable souls that are sharing their stories. So that was a tangent, but it's relevant. So we have 13,000 partners. These are partners who are teachers, librarians, grandmothers, folks running senior centers, community spaces, organizers, folks that see film as really a catalyst for change and a great way to engage people through art and through thoughtful storytelling. So we utilize these partners to let them know about films that are coming up. It's totally free to join. We were sending out DVDs pre-COVID because that was our way of protecting filmmakers' works. And now this moment has pushed us to go digital, which I've been wanting to do since we joined, but it's a lot harder than you think. And a lot of filmmakers, for a lot of good reasons, had hesitation about making their work shared online for virtual screenings. But yeah, we found a safe way to do it. So that's what we've been doing for the last few months.
Wow, amazing work. Tell us a little bit as you go. Let's look at this. I love a good organizational chart.
Yeah.
So for those who might not be familiar, break this down for us.
Yeah, so at AMDoc, the American Documentary Inc. is the large organization. So POV is a program under American Documentary. So American Documentary is a 501c3. We have different departments. I'm going to go from left to right. So we have POV Spark, which is our newest department. POV Spark, they make sure that public media doesn't get left behind when it comes to interactive media and emerging technology. So they're doing some really amazing things in VR and AR, and also hosting artist residencies where they're building strong partnerships with different innovators in this industry. Interactive is there's a small world that's really having their eyes on the future for the rest of the world. So it was important that POV is a part of that, a part of interactive projects, and that we can produce them. So this department, they're supporting actually international interactive projects. And some of them are featured on our website as well at amdoc.org. POV is the show that we've been talking about, around for 33 years. POV engages my department, so we run the community network. We also build educational resources for all of our films. We have lesson plans, discussion guides, reading lists, and we design them in a way where it speaks to many people. So there's not kind of academic language where a parent who's not in formal classrooms, there's no reason why you can't pick up our lesson plan and follow it. So yeah, that's great. And we started with And She Could Be Next. We actually made our first translated series of resources. So we made the discussion guide available in Spanish, since that's the discussion guide is our most universal resource. And we're doing that for selected films where we know that film is going to be in front of audiences that the majority of the folks speak other languages other than English. So that's one thing we're doing. POV shorts, with the limited attention span that folks have, and just like the great wealth of projects that are coming out that are short films. We are making, we have our third season of POV shorts out. So you can catch those shorts sometimes before or after our films, depending on where you're at. So that's one of our newest departments as well. And then America Reframed. We have a whole other documentary series that you can catch on World Channel. And America Reframed is produced by World Channel, and we have a partnership with them. So that's their broadcast partner. And you can catch that and look out for that wherever you are as well. So in each of these 5 boxes, these are whole departments. These comprised of multiple people, a very diverse staff, not so much in age as I would want to see. We have our staff tends to be between, I would say, 22 and 45, just FYI. But yeah, these are all the things that happen at American Documentary. So we're doing quite a bit of work. And one thing that I didn't say that my department also does is we're over artist emergency funds. So we have money where, although we're not a funder, we get funding, and we have an advisory board comprised of industry folks like Black Public Media, Cartemquin, Scribe Video Center in Philly, and they lend their eyes and good thinking on different requests we get to fund artists when they're in crisis. So we were able to push a COVID-19 Artist Emergency Fund out this April, which received 503 applications in 8 days from filmmakers across the country and interactive artists across the country. And we were able to get 500 rapid response grants out to cover basic needs such as food and health insurance and medicine. So we were able to get $130,000 out the door to those artists, which was amazing. So yeah, that's AmDoc.
Love it. We actually have a quick question from Facebook, which is awesome. What are some advice, as I'm going to go to the next slide, but what are some advice that you would give to someone who's interested in breaking into impact work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's important to be in spaces that are not film related, right? So finding community organizations that you are already doing the work with. connected to in some way. Maybe it's, young people you want to support. Finding what you're passionate about and really working in that space and learning about what impact looks like when you're in a classroom and you're a teacher. What does impact look like if you're working at a juvenile justice center or rehabilitation center, or in your own neighborhood? Like really wrestling with what impact is and looking at systemic change, looking at things that help shift ideas. So I really think it's important to see change making in other spaces outside of film to be a part of this work. And one of the questions we ask our filmmakers is what compels you to tell a story? Like why are you one of the people that should be telling the story? So you want to start getting that kind of experience that shows you a before and after picture, and that gives you an experience in movement building or making change. That's the most broad answer I can give. Yeah.
No, but I think it's a really important one. Which is what I love. Let's talk a little bit about partnerships, and then, if you don't mind, because there's a question about partnerships, so we can, if you can answer it maybe in your discussion here. But Kate Carpenter from Facebook asked us, Mona Lisa Stallworth, from YouTube. She said, "I'm a library, I think that commission. I'm a library commission, maybe commissioner. But how can I receive information regarding partnerships?" Can you talk a little bit about your partnerships?
Yes. So it doesn't cost anything to be a partner of ours. Like I said, we provide the films for free. We provide our educational resources for free as well. You can go to, and I would love if someone could type in the website for me, but communitynetwork.amdoc.org. And you can sign up and become a community network partner through. I'm also happy to share my email in the chat with anyone who wants something. If you have a specific idea, we do not at this time, depending on the request, we sometimes have some funding to lend to produce an event, but to become a partner is quite easy, and it will give you access to the films that are currently in our library. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Asad, would you like to share a little bit about some of the partners that you primarily work with that you've highlighted here?
Yeah. So what I didn't know as a big PBS fan growing up is that they were multicultural alliances where there's been, there's always revolutions that have started before us, and there were some great minds that came together to think about, all right, if you're talking about supporting marginalized voices and people of color and all of the things, like how do we make sure they have the proper funding? How do we make sure that people come into a world where there are cultural perspectives and a context that helps support the work and helps that can give that marketing support, that can give culturally responsive messaging when it's speaking about a film. So we have Latino Public Broadcasting, Black Public Media, Vision Maker Media, which supports works of Indigenous artists and content telling Indigenous stories. We also have CAM that focuses on Asian American stories, and we have Pacific Islanders and communication. So these 5 entities make up the Multicultural Alliance, and they also receive money from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and they help in making sure that we get diverse programming within public media. So a lot of people don't think about entities, but they co-produce projects and some of our materials. So they're also funders, but they, like Black Public Media, they run amazing labs for filmmakers and interactive artists to help them better their craft and put them in touch with other folks who can serve as mentors and funders of their work. So they hold pitch events and really showcase the work of artists of color. So I wanted to make sure I highlighted these entities.
Awesome. Yeah. Super important. And Assad, as we're moving on, I have another question, also from Kate Carpenter from Facebook. And she wanted to know one unforgettable memory or possibly a favorite experience that you've had in your time working with American documentary and POV.
Yeah. One good question. One memory is working on a film called Minding the Gap. Minding the Gap was a season 32 film, and it was a real coming of age story between three friends, one Asian American, young Black man, and a young white man, and they came together over skateboarding, but through skateboarding they developed this friendship that really spoke to different issues that they were faced with, unemployment, domestic violence, things like that, alcoholism. And we were planning some events in Philadelphia. And it was one event we were planning where funder was like, we would love to host a screening of this film, and that's always great, and they were going to make it free to the public and all of that. But if we were going to bring the protagonist to Philly, I had recently joined POV, and I'm like, if we're going to Philly, like they can arrive in the daytime, and let's try to hit up a school as well as a juvenile facility, because I really felt like it was a documentary that would speak to young audiences.
Yeah.
So we had to go through a juvenile facility through a school, which was great. There was a school at the detention center, and I accompanied the protagonist, for the Q&A and held a conversation with him. And the kinds of questions that the students asked were, I believe some of the smartest people are incarcerated, unfortunately, and taken from our communities. And we had we just had the best dialogue with students. And they just outshined the audience so much for the funder event that we had later that day, where the moderator just was more interested in the awards that the film got rather than the content of the film. But why that's the best event is that when we left that community center, and we went to art high school too, that focused, we went to a film class. But when we left that detention center, the young man in the film said, I never wanted to go to college, or I never had a plan. I never knew what I wanted to do. And making this film is great, but it was the first time he was in a room of people. And unfortunately it was, young people who were incarcerated, but they looked like him. And he came from a community where people didn't look like him. And then he went on to festivals, facing crowds at Sundance and other prestigious festivals where people did not look like him. So he had to go to the prison, and that's when he saw people that looked like him. And that's when he felt most moved by the dialogue that he was able to have, that he said, I actually want to work in a detention center. I want to be a counselor. And is making some steps to do that. But I think that's, after people are so vulnerable with their own personal lives, for them to get some form of inspiration, and for them to get that through a dialogue with the audience, like that's everything. Like that's the engagement that we want. That's life changing. We also want the engagement that can change laws, but when you can change the course of someone's life, that's priceless. So that was a great memory, a great day.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. And even going back to
Yeah.
Minding the Gap, if I'm not mistaken, that was nominated for an
Yes.
Oscar.
Oscar. Yep.
Yeah,
Yes. It
amazing,
was.
amazing film. Beautiful if you haven't seen it. I'd
Yeah.
love for you to share a little bit. Tell us about your colleagues. We got a couple more questions coming
Yeah.
in, but yeah.
Yeah, this is just my team. Go through it real quick. Our education manager, Courtney Cook. She is from the South and brings rural experiences to our team. And I think that's so important that as we're looking at the whole country, that we don't forget about those rural spaces whose stories aren't always amplified. So she leads on working with writers to build our educational resources. So that's a job, consultant position that a lot of people don't think about, like, writing educational resources around films. So we hire former teachers, we hire journalists, academics to write for us. And crossing my fingers, but I think Dr. Chairs, we are going to work with you in the near future around one of our upcoming films. So we're excited about that, and thank you for being willing to work with us. We have Rachel Friedland, our senior associate. She started as an intern and moved from intern, assistant, associate to senior associate, all within about 2 years. She's just a rock star, and she's from Queens and a Latinx woman. Akila Thomas, our manager of community engagement. She also comes from the South, but also has roots in Harlem, and worked around film engagement before she joined, and worked in DC with schools and a production house out in DC. And Selena Lautner, she runs Artemis Independent, which is a women-owned and operated firm that builds relationships with the 300 plus stations we have all over the country. So PBS stations are so different in size and scale, and they're each serving their own community, so they all have their own flavor. And she learns what that secret sauce is for each station, and really focuses on the top 75 stations in the country that are in both urban and rural places. And then the bad photo, of myself.
You look great. Great.
Thanks. Took that in like a passport photo.
We're like, you're not allowed to smile. You just have to give you gotta be very stern. Like you're not excited to travel. Like what?
I know POV needed it like the next day. All right. So the next slide.
Yeah.
Should we go to a question?
I was gonna say, I wanted to. I'm trying to be mindful of the questions, and I'm so grateful for you all asking and engaging. Because this also, and some of the work also you might answer some of these questions, but we have a question. How do you incorporate empathy into your work? Any advice on that? And is that difficult to do? That's from Facebook.
Yeah, thank you for that question. There's been dialogue around empathy, and there's a great piece written by Sonia Childress, who you all should look up. If I have time, I'll try to post it in the link, in the chat. But going beyond empathy, so there's conversations around how far does empathy take us, right? And I find that it's important that we build communities. One of the things that I use in my life and also within POV is like, how can we build community around values, right? So not just around your demographic or where you live, but like get into those deeper conversations around values. So we have to think about empathy and how do we hold it and carry it. And one of my favorite questions is, what does it look like? So I think our values to the left of the screen really speak to some of that, right? Because you have to listen to hold empathy. We don't want to parachute into communities and do a one-size-fits-all in our work. So we really take the time to slow down and build relationships. I think when you look at a number like 13,000, it could become really transactional. So finding those moments where you can put it on your calendar to make sure that you are sending that email or picking up the phone to check in with the partner to see how their event went last week, or building out training resources that, when COVID hit and we knew that everything was going to be going virtual, we were able to hire an 11-year member of our community network to actually train other community network partners to operate Zoom. So we knew that in her day job, she worked for a library system and she did lots of events and was familiar with that technology. So finding ways to employ people in this moment, I think is really powerful. Like, folks are being called out for not having a diverse staff and having people of color in leadership positions. And I think that's important. And it's also important that we look at the tables where it's low-hanging fruit to get folks that understand the end user, understand the audience, and this person had, they got laid off. So we were also able to step in at a critical time where they could provide for their families. So looking at impact, I think looking at someone's budget, looking at your own personal budget, you can see what you're putting your attention to, right? So, and what's important to someone. So holding these values all throughout our work, I think is critical, and it's hard to do. So like creating that safer space where you can call out team members, say like, I had an issue with this, and we need to talk about this. And we have those hard conversations as a team. We feel differently about film sometimes, but holding, I think there's always empathy being held for the people sharing their stories, and really, even though the contract is with the filmmaker, making sure that you find ways and that they're clear about how they can engage this person, and make sure that when they speak on a panel at a post-screening event, that they're able to get paid, that there is an honorarium that is given, that we're not just doing extractive filmmaking and having practices where we're not honoring people's time, no matter what class or what assumptions you make about their life. We think that's really valuable. Another way that we value the sharing of stories is that we hold media trainings. We work with Auburn, which is an entity in New York that does incredible work around spirituality, and they are one of the people say that we don't care what religion you are, but Auburn really is an inclusive space, one of the most inclusive partners that we work with. And we hire them to build, they actually partner with us, and we bring our money together to build media trainings for the film teams and the protagonists, because they're about to enter a world full of questions, of interviews, of panels, and you don't want to assume that they can navigate questions. When someone's asking you, does your mother have a job yet, on a panel, what boundaries can you have around how much you're still going to share after the film is produced? And and the public, bless our hearts, like some folks can be really intrusive and sometimes disrespectful. So making sure that we give our protagonists those skills, and we can share with them those skills and help them have space to practice and feel comfortable, so that they're excited about these opportunities and not shine away from them. That's important. And then the menu on the right are just some things that we offer. So when you think about what is impact, these are the pieces that we offer. So I know you all were just speaking with Grace Lee, who is phenomenal, and she's making such wonderful content. We love her at POV. She's done a number of films with us. We built out some we work with impact producers, and they had an entity that they may have spoken about, probably the League. And the League is doing a lot of their impact campaigns. So since we have an impact department, sometimes we have filmmakers who come with their own impact teams, and we learn how to collaborate and say, we'll handle these pieces. And it's great that you have more resources to create your own discussion guide. So instead of a discussion guide, we're going to make a healing guide that speaks to partners. So we're flexible, and we really want to hear what the filmmaker sees as impact, and build out an impact campaign that takes advantage of everything from holidays to what's happening in the news and what's happening in this part of the world. And so really having your finger on, it's great to have a diverse team so you can have your finger on all the different things that are happening around the country, so that you can be strategic about how you shape your event and when you plan to do it.
Wow, that's amazing, Assad. Just a quick question, and we only have a couple more minutes, so I just want to thank everyone for the questions. I want to thank you so much for your time. But Flo Jones from Facebook asked, do you accept submissions from high school students?
That's a good question. I don't see why not. If not, like, that's a problem that we need to fix. I think you have to be 18 and up, but don't quote me on that. So our programming and production department, they handle submissions, and on our website, we do take submissions. We have a call for entries that happens at different points in time, but you can email me and I'll get that question answered. I never had that question asked. But I love that, and if we don't, that would be puzzling to me. So yeah, I will get you an answer on that. Sorry, I don't know off top.
No, we'll find out, right? We'll get the information.
We'll find
That's
out.
awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have. So tell us a little bit when you're thinking of, and I want to be mindful of our time, but strategic plan and evaluation plan. What are some of the highlights here?
Yeah, so we have to watch a film at least twice, right? So we watch it as a viewer, come with an open mind, and then we watch with our laptop, and we're taking notes on the film's messaging, and thinking about who would this film speak to. There's so many. There's so many relationships that you see in a film, so many themes, but you want to be able to connect those themes to people, and to think about what activities and experiences you can do to change structures, open minds. So these are some of the categories that we have when we're building a strategic plan, and there's so many things that come into it, but it should be connected to the film's messaging. And sometimes a film may barely touch on a particular subject, but it's in the impact plan, or in the campaign, it's really important for the filmmakers to get a certain message across. So we sometimes build on a small message in the film and use our resources, whether it's the discussion guide, the lesson plan, or even in our marketing, to ensure that key messages are shared. So everything, we pay attention to everything in terms of the images and the words, and staying away from certain words if we feel like they can cause harm. We're always asking filmmakers about terms that we should stay away from. And sometimes you see a film and you're like, oh yeah, that's about advocacy. And they're like, no, it's not about advocacy. Actually we're trying to abolish police, so it's important that we get clear on those words. And evaluation plan, we want to make sure that we have ways to capture what we did. So it's great to have the data of like where the film was screened and what kind of groups engaged with the film. But you want to determine, this looks different for every film, so these are words and some definitions, but these are things that I think this slide is important to learn about some of the language that is used in the impact space, and to think about, you know, the tools that you capture. You know, when you're looking at a screening platform, a virtual platform, you want to see what kind of report will this platform give you after the experience. You know, will you have access to the chat? Will you get everyone's emails? You know, there are different things that you want to consider, but there's so many things that could be used as a tool to capture evidence. And sometimes it's, you know, quantitative data is as qualitative data is as important as quantitative data in this work. So,
which is so important, so important. Yeah. Assad, I think our time is up, but before we go, though, I do want to share the educational resources that we were discussing. So why don't you go ahead and sort of wrap us up here?
Yeah, so in this moment where everyone's a teacher, I have 3 children, myself, all teenagers, and it's been real eye-opening in this moment seeing how other teachers are teaching them. And we have a reading list that's developed by our library board. So we also hire librarians to create reading lists for our films. We have poetry, fiction, nonfiction on those lists. And the discussion guide is the most commonly used tool. So if any of our films are of interest to you, it's great to pick up, even if you're watching it with your family. Like it's there's some really thoughtful questions, and we work to match up the writers with the communities that with the content of the film, and also want to have additional impact by hiring people of that community. So the discussion guide is a great resource, and the lesson plan is almost always created by educators and teachers to make sure that we can have connections to learning standards, and that we're doing more shorter lesson plans to line up with the school day. So we have some lesson plans that speak to a timed schedule that is, the block scheduling, where there are longer classes, but also like 45-minute lessons in there as well. So these are all free. So please tell your teacher friends to, you know, ask them, are they utilizing documentaries in their classrooms? You know, in this moment, it's really easy to drop a link and tell your students to watch it and come back. So please utilize our resources, communitynetwork.amdoc.org. You can sign up for free. And thank you so much, Dr. Cheers, for having me today.
Thank you for being here. This was wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I am so grateful for your time this evening, for staying with us, whether you joined us on Facebook, or you joined us on YouTube, or you were even engaged on another social media platform. We are really, really grateful for your time today. We're gonna wrap it up, but there's so much more tomorrow, so much more tomorrow. So please make sure to join us. And I do not go anywhere, actually, because Black Hollywood Then and Now is our programming. There's gonna be an amazing discussion that's gonna be happening at 7 o'clock. So you have time to go and maybe grab something to eat and come back and join us. But Assad, thank you so much, my friend. I look forward to talking to you soon. I want to give a shout out to our ASL interpreter. Thank you for all of your work. And we're honored to be here. So take care, everyone. Thank you. And I will see you all tomorrow morning back here at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have some more amazing programming. Check everything out on the March on Washington Film Festival website. Peace, everybody. Thank you.
All right. Peace.
Yeah.